Hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to be talking about the rear main seal on a 2000 Jeep TJ. Now the 2000 above differ from videos I see out there. The pre-2000 will have a lip that comes out and it'll protrude outward right there. The 2000 above do not. 2000 happens to be a half year, so if you're going to buy your seal on Amazon or O'Reilly's, they will try to sell you the wrong seal. Do not fall for it. This motor was made in March of 2000, so unless you got something pre-March, you're probably be okay with the 2-circle seal like this. Here's the Velcro part number. Pause it, like it, remember it. Okay, how does this differ? Well, because it's 2 half circles, if you go by what small block builders that have this same seal, or what the Mopar Jeep dealer does, they put an offset. We're going to talk about the offset in a second. A couple things. Can you see how the SOB before me put a silicone adhesive on the seal itself and then slid it in? That does not make my life easier. F you. Thank you very much for making my life harder than it needed to be. I used a punch to get the seal out of the motor, but what I also use with that punch is a socket that fits it with an extension that gives me enough length, not too much length, so I have control, but my hammer swinging, I have more volume with the hammer, and the seal comes out a little bit easier. Even though they were stuck in there, it still came out pretty easy. The main thing for making this video is, believe it or not, gaskets and sealants. There are a lot of different forms of sealants, and what you're supposed to use on the main cap for this is different than a lot of other things. So why does it matter? Because when you first put a main cap on a brand new motor, you usually put this thread in there, I forgot the name of it, and then you put the cap on, it squeezes it, and it tells you what your variance between the cap is. This is super important to make sure when you put this cap back on, it sits where it was and sits as, where it's supposed to be. You start putting, tons of gasket crap in here, you're gonna screw that all up, and you're gonna cause wear in your motor, or maybe even something worse. So that is why it's important not to be globbing on a ton of gaskets. Also, I see a lot of people freaking out and putting a lot of stuff on this side. I just want to show you something on this. Here's where your seal goes inside. Here is where your oil pan gasket goes. Okay, anything before this is not as much a concern. That is why where you put the sealant is important. I'm gonna show you, I'll first tell you where I'm putting the sealant, how I'm doing it, then I'm gonna tell you about the block, and then I'll pause it and I'm gonna put it on and I'm gonna show you how it looks. Okay, first thing is, I'm gonna use a dish soap for the bottom of the ring. The bottom of the ring, that's my dish soap. I'll put a little bit of dish soap on both. I'm gonna do it on both. Probably don't need to do it on the bottom cap, but I'm gonna do it anyways. And I'm gonna slice that in. And then here it comes, I'm gonna use this punch with the tape. I measured it off of 2 pennies, and I'm gonna offset it by that tape. Why? Because I can't get a measuring tool on the block upside down. So as long as I have that tape mark right there, when I offset the motor one, it will be offset the same amount, and now give me my best chance. This is all to get us so we give us the best chance of not having a leak. Now, some people will put these flush on both ends. That is not how you're supposed to do it, but I think it's acceptable, because if you look at Velcro, they send you that little plastic sleeve to basically not rip your gasket. Well, if you're supposed to use that plastic sleeve to insert it in the motor, not to rip your gasket, how am I supposed to use that plastic sleeve for the last little bit to offset it without ripping my gasket? So I can see why people would not offset it. Now, if you don't offset it, wait a few minutes and I'll tell you what to do, because that makes a big difference, okay? Now, it must have fell down. I also, instead of using the Velcro little plastic piece, I have a straw laying around here somewhere that all I did was cut a straw in half, a little piece, and cut an angle onto it. And basically I used the straw. There's actually, I cut 2 extra ones. They're right in there. And I put that on the block. I put that straw in first. It's a little bit longer than the Velcro piece, and I slide the seal in. That, again, makes no sense to me why I'm using that, and then the last little bit I'm just pushing and smushing against it, but that is how you're supposed to do it. Now, when you put your sealant on, you're using an anaerobic sealant. You do not want to use a gasket maker or something heavy. You can even get away with using probably the Permaflex aviation form of gasket. I still think the anaerobic gasket is a little bit better. Why? Because these two gasket makers I just mentioned are meant for machine surfaces. And remember how I was just talking to you that you want to keep this 100% the same? Well, you want to use a gasket that is going to be able to be as flat as possible. And also the anaerobic has a benefit where it doesn't start drying unless there's no air. So the moment you start tightening it down, that's why you got to do it a little bit quicker. It won't dry until there's no air. So when you're going to take this sealant, you're going to, and I'll show you like I said in a little bit, you're only concerned about, here's your seal, you're concerned about this edge. You see right here? Remember I said the oil pan seal is? You're going from here, you're putting a, some people just put a dab there. What you're really supposed to do is put a dab here, smear it around, and I like to smear it to this corner, around this corner, to right about there, and I put a little bit on that back edge. So that way, that gives me the best chance of not having a leak. Because remember, your oil seal's here. So this is in your block in your oil pan. Now there is a little edge right here, and I see a lot of people put a sealant right there. If it makes you feel better, you can take a little bit and just put a little bit on the edge. Not on the face, but right on the edge, because there's a little groove right there. If it makes you feel better, you can do that right there. But more importantly is right here in this area, because what you want that to do is seal, not glob. Again, you're not globbing it on. Just enough to basically seal this area, so that's going to prevent the oil from coming out. And with your gasket right there, you're not going to have any issues. Now I will first put in the seal for the block, and again, I'm going to just, all I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put some soap in there and slide it in. Now you're going to ask, why do I have this black sealant? For you folks that want to do flush mounting, and I might even use a little bit, you got to make sure these ends are super clean. But what you can do is put a dab on the end of this, just a dab, not a lot, just a dab. Dab it, kind of wipe it, and when you put it together, those two seals should meet together. But you shouldn't use an anaerobic on this. I wouldn't. And the reason being is anaerobic dries super hard. So you are on a crank that's moving, and there's friction, and the movement I think causes that anaerobic to break off a little bit. I would use something a little bit more flexible, like a sealant or a gasket maker, the black or the true, whatever they call it. But I would use something like that on the tips, because you want something a little bit more flexible on that seal. Now it's already 8 minutes, so this video is going way too long, so let us start. As you can see, I'm underneath the Jeep now. My straw is in there, and my gasket, I'm not deforming. I'm just gonna start pushing it in. It's already going in. That soap is helping out. That straw is in there a little bit with the soap on there, so it's helping it slide. And I'm trying not to cut the side or the top of the gasket, because that's where you don't want to cut. So I'm just gonna push this through, and then I'll use my little punch to do the offset. I try not to use the punch to push it all the way through, because I don't have a plastic punch. If you're doing that, you might want to use a plastic punch, because you don't want to rip the gasket. You just got to be really careful. I'll push this through and I'll be right back. Okay, so the seal is in. Now, here's where you got to decide. Are you going to do an offset? How big of an offset? I taped my punch right here. That's 2 pennies. I should go bigger offset, but I just don't trust getting that seal in without damaging it. And all I did was put it up there, and it came out to that measurement. Now I can go out underneath this vehicle and do the same offset for the cap. You don't have to do this. If you just do it level and use a little bit of RVT, like silicone, to seal those two, very little bit, I think you're fine. But I'm just gonna try to do it like the manual wants you to do, a little bit of offset. I'm just not doing that big of an offset. So let me get from underneath here and get to the top side. All right, so I put the seal in. I use my dish soap here too, and my oil. I double checked my measurements with my punch and my tape on both sides. They're both 100% equal. This is what I feel comfortable with. You can go a little bit more, but I feel comfortable with this because this piece of metal on either here or on the block side is holding that gasket together, like tight. So when I go to put it on, it should go on nice and easy without ripping the gasket. I am going to put a little bit of silicone black on there. That is going to be different than what I'm going to put on the metal, like I told you before. Let me go put that on right now and show you how that looks before I pop this thing back on. I'm just going to talk real quick because I want to get this in the vehicle. There's a seal. There are the two dabs, you barely could see it, of the black on just the ends, just to do a little nice seal. I put the anaerobic sealant here. That might be a little bit too much. We're gonna go put that in, torque at 40, 16, 80 pounds. I also found a bulletin on the Jeep forum. I found a bulletin in 2004 about rear main seal leaks and things that cause it. And that might look like it, but I'll talk about that after I'm done putting this thing in. So I hope you found those tips helpful. Remember, 40, 60, 80. When you put the bearing cap in there, hit it with a block or a brass hammer to let it set. You don't want that lip to get caught or either side, because when you torque it down, it will crack and then you're screwed. The bulletin I was talking about is for 2000 and above for standard transmission, the 4-liter 6-cylinder motor. They're talking about behind the head. Let me just, oops, wrong way. They're talking about behind the head, between the bell housing and the block, there is a gap. And that gap lets dirt get into where your main seal sits at, and that destroys the main seals faster. They're saying to RVT the gap, and that should help out with destroying the seal quicker. So do your research. Don't believe me. I'm just a man on the internet. Have a great day. Like, subscribe. Hope to see you again, and talk to you later.